on the front passenger side of my car hit the back driver's side of a stopped semi at somewhere between 60 and 70 miles an hour. Cars do not fit under stopped semis like they do in Fast and Furious.
This is Designing Leaders, the podcast where simplicity meets leadership. I'm your coach, Desi Maynor, your guide on this journey towards effective and efficient leadership. Here we unite theory and practice, bringing you actionable insights from the front lines of leadership. From boardrooms to sales floors, we're breaking down silos and fostering teamwork. Every episode is a new step towards absolute accountability and clear communication. I'm your host, Desi Maynor, and let's dig in. What's up, Designing Leaders? We have another awesome episode here for you today. This is your host, Desi, and we have Kristin Howard on with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
This is going to be a blast. Everyone's super excited to hear about your story, some of your wins, some of your challenges, obstacles. So I'm not one to beat around the bush a lot, so I like to go right in and say, tell us how you got into being the owner of 3 UPS stores. I'm guessing it didn't start there.
Oh, definitely did not
walk
start
us
there.
walk us through that. So you're the owner operator of 3 UPS stores.
Mm-hmm.
You have a vast amount of staff, managers, frontliners, all of the above.
Exactly.
And in 3 locations that are like not next to each other either. So you like got some stuff going on.
Just a little bit.
to put it gently, right? So I guess let's start there. Walk us through what was that process like? Going from, hey, maybe we should do a thing to we have 3 things now.
So let me back up a little bit further than that.
Okay.
So growing up,
Yeah.
I mean, as a girl who had a dad as a teacher, a mom as a secretary, I didn't know what I wanted to be. Maybe I'd go into medicine, maybe be a teacher like my dad. So the concept of being a business owner, not really something that was for me. I mean, you've got people like Mark Cuban and Steve Jobs. Those are business owners, not
Right.
Kristin McJr. Bacon Cheeseburger here.
Yeah, it's funny though, because like even those guys would probably say the same thing that you're saying of like, when I started, I was like, a business owner, what's that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and now they're, it's crazy. So I feel like everyone has that like origin story of like, me even a decade ago would been like, yeah, right, whatever. And like, I'm a school teacher and I coach football, and so, but now to be like, I'm 6 years into entrepreneuring the game, it's like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I feel like that's the same, but yeah.
So my husband came home from work one day. He was like, you want to know something? I want to buy a business. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. Again, only rich, famous people do that.
Right.
He's like, no, we could buy a franchise. There's one for sale in Ohio. And I laughed at him for that since we live just outside of Ann Arbor. He's like, I've got my pilot's license. I'll fly down there and check on it. We can do absentee ownership. I had no concept of what that meant. It meant you bought a business and you didn't go there.
Right.
And he's like, no, we can hire staff. We'll have managers. We'll have them all run it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it all started, in understanding what it meant to own a business versus you get to work on it instead of in it. And that's where it all started. I drove up to our local UPS store and I was like, hey, I want to buy a store. What do you think of the franchise? He's like, well, when and where? I'm like, whenever. I just want to buy one.
Yeah.
No concept of what it meant.
Yep.
He's like, well, I'm thinking about selling mine. So 2 years and a kid later, we had our first UPS store.
So cool. And where was that one at?
Ypsilanti.
That's the one in Ypsilanti. Okay,
That's
so did you guys ever buy the one in Ohio then, or was that like just a learning expedition?
That was hey, let's go buy that, and yeah, that was about
And
it.
it just didn't pan out. But it sounds like you at least perked your interest enough to start to go down that path.
Mm-hmm.
A little closer to home though.
Exactly.
Which is very good. Okay, so and how long did you run that initial one? Like, well, let me back up a step and say, like, what's your background in?
So I have a background in public relations and marketing.
Okay.
So in college, I was on the speech and debate team, the cheerleading squad. I was all over the place.
Yeah.
With I don't know how many jobs, but I was everywhere. So talking to a couple of people, they were saying, well, public relations, you get to take all of the acting classes, but you have a journalism background. So I get to learn how to use all the right words.
Yeah.
And I have the best words.
So that's fun, and obviously pairs well with entrepreneuring. That's for sure.
And similar to, I mean, you've talked about in past podcasts about the disc.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And me being the top highest corner you can possibly be as an I.
Yeah, high I personality, right?
Definitely. And I think that's what attributes to everything working out for our store. My husband is a super, super deep end C.
Okay.
So being on the complete opposite of that spectrum.
So you got the peopling, right? He's got the organization and the systems and the processes and the details. Love it. It's a great combo to have.
And then you've got our regional manager who runs all 3 of our stores for us.
Okay, cool.
Who ends up being a great mixture between an S and a C. So it brings it all right to the middle.
Very good. So let's go back to like you have one store.
Oops, I'm sorry.
And you have, how many people do you have in the store? Like what's your staff like? Like how did you go from like, we're going to buy a business till we bought a UPS store to now it's growing and it's doing well?
So within 6 months of purchasing our first store, everybody in the UPS store network began to see everything we were doing with that store growing and building in the community and helping and things like that. And I came home one day, I was like, hey, why don't we buy another one? Okay. And my husband's like, I don't know about that. I was like, well, there's one not too far from us for sale. Yeah. And we checked that out and realized that didn't make sense. And we waited. And when the opportunity came up for the Fenton store, it just kind of clicked.
Yeah.
My funny story about the Fenton store purchase option. So he says, hey, did you hear the Fenton store's for sale? I was like, well, did you let them know we were interested? And being an I really don't think about details.
Right.
He's like, no, I don't know if it makes sense. I was like, okay, did you let him know we were interested? Yeah. He said, no. I was like, well, let me call him, find out. And I called, I said, hey, we're interested. And this is Friday night. And I was like, hey, we're interested in buying the store. If you can give us till Monday, I'll let you know if it makes sense. And he's like, sure.
2 days.
Exactly. It's Friday to Monday. I was like, that's enough time. It's just over the weekend.
Right.
And by the way, how many people have you heard from? He's like 3 or 4 other people, but I was waiting to hear from you. And that just like that made me have to buy that store.
Yeah.
So I get off the phone, jumping up and down, saying, hey, he's giving us till Monday. My husband, in a very deadpan, thanks.
Nice.
I was like, what? He's like, you are giving me less than 48 hours to find out if it makes financial sense for us to buy that. Yes.
You're like, yeah, we'll be good. It's going to be great.
So Sunday night, he's like, hey, that store in Fenton?
Yeah.
Yes. With the assumptive ask.
Yeah, good.
It's like, we're going to buy it. So 6 months later, we ended up with that store.
Very cool.
6 months later was the opportunity to buy the Monroe store.
Oh my gosh. So 6 basically. 6 months, 6 months, 6 months.
Yeah, the first one was a year and a half. We had to wait on timing and stuff for this.
Okay, so from the first inclination of let's buy a UPS store to actually getting the first one was a year and a half.
The first inclination to buying the first one was about 2 years.
Okay, yeah.
And then we bought the Fenton store 2 years later because of the process of going through the purchase.
Okay, that makes more sense.
And then Monroe was a year later. So we had 3 stores in 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we also had 3 kids in 4 years.
Okay.
In that same time.
When you went into the UPS store, the first one, right, the one in Ypsilanti, because I think this would pertain to a lot of the listeners. Was their staff already there and involved? So you guys had to completely staff the whole thing?
There was nothing.
Okay, so let's pull out some nuggets from that and say, how do you build a staff from nothing?
You talk to people.
Okay.
I should put it that way.
Walk us through your process there of like how you do that.
So I know a large amount of people, actually. A large amount of people know who I am, and I smile and talk to them.
Yeah.
Everybody's my friend until you're not kind of personality.
Yep, for sure.
And I posted on Facebook, hey guys, does anybody know a graphic designer or someone looking for a job? And random guy replied back saying, hey, I'm looking for a job, and ended up hiring him to be our store manager, who also happened to be a graphic designer and ran the entire print thing for our Ypsi store.
Yeah.
And with that, we had hired a couple people, and it just grew. And that was an amazing team that we started with. And that's kind of where it got started. I don't think we would be where we're at if it wasn't for that initial team.
Yeah,
we were, I guess you would call it at the beginning, a micro business.
Yeah, for sure. So you just put it out there. Like no one's going to know unless we tell them. So I'm going to start telling people.
and immediately jumped online as soon as we closed on it. People, I bought a business.
Yeah.
Come see me. And no idea what I'm doing.
And just sharing the story and things like, I said that's been a big problem lately. If you're just finding good help, finding the right staff, make sure you're full, employee churn. And I'm a sports guy, right? So in college football, like you're always recruiting. Mm-hmm. Like you're always trying to find the next player. And more than that, you're trying to find like 20, 25 players every year. So like, that's what I've been telling people, especially this year, is like, you're always looking. Mm-hmm. Like you should always be recruiting and always be like, no, do you have to spend money on the paid ads for the Indeed? Like, no, but like you also want to teach your team how to recruit also.
Definitely.
Right? Like I've been running on this system lately. That's been helping teams grow, is training your teammates and providing like a referral program essentially. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, even I had one that was like $1,000 referral. Like if you brought this person in and they stay for 90 days, you get $1,000 bonus.
Wow.
Which is crazy, right? They filled an entire staff using that.
Wow.
Like it was like, if you find a good waiter or waitress, like you say, hey, you're good at what you do. You looking for a job that pays more and gives you more stability and benefit or whatever it is that you're offering. And like, so it's like they taught their team to like, keep your head on a swivel. We're always looking for good help. Who do you know? Who do you notice? Right. And then just ask the question, just like you're saying.
Kind of a funny story with that as I continue to grow the Ypsi store.
For sure.
So we had a garage sale at my house. And
love it. I used to go garage selling with my grandparents all the time.
Garage sale, selling baby stuff. And this individual, this woman, walks up and obviously to me, she's pregnant. And I was like, oh, I have lots of baby stuff. You have this and that. And just start a very casual conversation with her, asking her what she's going to do. Mm-hmm. She has a baby. If she's working, she's like, oh, I'm a graphic designer. Note she now is running she's my print manager for my Ypsilanti store.
Great.
So buying baby stuff too, an amazing graphic designer and print manager.
So cool, right? I mean,
that's random places you meet people. If you don't know, if you don't ask.
Yeah, that's it right there.
It's my life motto.
Because like a lot of people will completely be quiet on their social medias, their networking, all that stuff, but then they'll be running an ad on Indeed because they need somebody. It's like,
gonna get you.
That's crazy, right? Like just tell people about it and then tell your team like, hey, we're always looking for awesome people. Mm-hmm. Like I always say, like you should just always be interviewing. Like just because you interview does not mean you have to hire someone. Mm-hmm. And well, we have a full staff. Okay, that's great. Well, I bet you if they're anything like any other team in all of small business, there's somebody on that staff that's lacking development. Let's just call it lacking development. So you get a good one and then just dump the worst one and then keep growing and getting stronger and stronger. But like, just because you're
out of a job.
Exactly. Right. But you're training, you're growing your team and you're making it stronger. I mean, the old cliche is, you're only as strong as your weakest link. So it's like always be recruiting, always be interviewing, and you only have to hire if it's the right one that kind of forces your decision. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I always like, are you like, because they'll come to me and they'll say like, I don't know what to do here. And I'll say, well, if you don't know what to do, then they probably weren't that good.
Right.
Like if you sit down and you're taking notes in the interview because you're learning from them and they're like, and you're like, you leave that meeting and you're like, I feel like we have to have this person. It's like, that's a good one. Mm-hmm. Right. But if you're like, yeah, I don't know, it's like, that's a no then. Unless it's like, hell yes, it's a hell no type of a deal. So anyways, that's my 2 bits on that. But I love it. Yeah, just put it out there. Hey, I'm doing a thing. We need some awesome people. You seem like you're an awesome person. You want to talk further?
Why not?
For sure. Love it.
Yeah.
So you filled that one up and and you had it running good. And now talk to me about how did like your role as owner operator change when you go from 1 to 2?
So that was a big change, especially with the situation in Fenton.
Okay.
Fenton was nowhere, not even close to what Ypsi was.
Okay.
Ypsi was basically an empty box, figuratively and physically.
Like figuratively, but also for real, it was an empty box.
That we had to fill. And the Fenton store was an up and working, hardworking machine. We basically just put our name on a piece of paper. Avoided letting the community know we were changing ownership. Okay. Making sure the the team there was happy and comfortable and secure. I didn't want anything to change. That store was doing amazing when we took over. There were things, yes, that needed to be updated and adjusted.
Optimized.
Yeah, optimized.
Yeah.
But what it was doing at that moment was exactly what we needed.
Like it didn't need a regime change, so to speak.
Nope.
It was more like, hey, we're going to just slip in here and just everything's the same. Keep on coming. That kind of deal.
And as we started to grow and started to make some changes, the team, some decided that wasn't what they wanted to do or what they or they grew out of the job, which happens. Who doesn't? I mean,
just natural pressure, right? I mean, I always call it pressure. One of the things that I've found that I've now started sharing is like when we'll start a thing, right, consulting or whatever it is, I'll say, don't be surprised if we begin to attract or detract some employees.
That's exactly what happened.
Right? Like, it's like I'm not going to intentionally try to push someone out, but I can tell you that we're going to intentionally grow and get better. Someone's probably not going to like that. But on the flip side, there's going to be some people over here that really like it. And those are the people we want to come this way, right?
That's exactly what happened.
It's just like natural growing pains, essentially. But talk to me. I just wrote this down because you kind of like, it sounds to me like you grew Ypsilanti kind of from scratch up. Right?
Exactly.
And like there's I'm going to call it ego, essentially. Of like, hey, I took this football team from 0-16 to 16-0. Like, that's a thing. Like, I'm proud of that, right? And I'm sure you had, right? Yeah, the line. We're going to go to the Super Bowl next year. Don't even worry about that, right? We got our OC back, our DC back. We're good to go. But, like, growing that from scratch, like, there's blood, sweat, and tears that goes into that, right? And you're super proud of it. Fenton, totally different. Like, talk to me about like your emotions and feeling and kind of ego that went with that of like, I'm used to building this from scratch to maybe we shouldn't change much.
It actually was nice.
Okay.
I know a huge difference, but as the conversation between my husband and I, who's also my business partner, the conversation that we are going to work on our business and not in it. One of us wasn't going to run one store and the other person run the other store. We wanted to build the team with the leadership in place that we could let them just go do their thing. Yeah. And if they needed our help, they'd call and let us know. Yeah. And that's exactly what Fenton was already set up to do.
Nice.
We had to go to some trainings for the UPS store corporate on how to be a multiple center owner.
Okay, gotcha, yeah.
Which was nice.
Some good support there, yeah.
Definitely. And they regularly come and check on us. It's what having a franchise does.
Yep, for sure.
To make sure that we're doing everything and having it all in place, which essentially holds us, but technically the staff accountable because it's their store. We let it be their store. It's their culture.
Let's live there for a second because I think that's so key because the way I always talk about leadership is like you work for them. They don't work for you. And you've said that a couple of times now and I love it. Talk to me like, how did you learn that? Like, why is that piece so important to you?
I couldn't do everything that I do today if I had that mindset. Yeah. The idea that you have the individual who owns their own business, that works at their business, they're not going to make money if they're not at their store. Yeah. You have the multi-tiered marketing individuals that sell
the pyramid stuff.
They're not making money if they're not working all of the time. And both my husband and I agreed when we first started even talking about business ownership, that's not how we wanted to have our business set up. That's not a vision for us. Yeah. And what we've tried to do is instill that vision in everyone we hire, in our leadership, in our team, to let them know where we want to go so they can help us. Yeah. At the same time as helping themselves, because if we grow, they can grow. Yeah.
So walk us through, like, how do you share that vision and like, how do you kind of empower them, especially I guess with your leaders in each of the locations? Like how do you get them to buy in, right? Kind of take accountability of that store to get that ownership essentially.
When most times during the interview process, everything starts at the interview process to let them know how important it is. Say, yes, the there are owners, they don't live too far. However, and this is, I should say, our management is telling the individual that's being interviewed that we don't go in, we're not there all the time. We're not on top of them. We're not micromanaging, which some people look at as leaders do micromanage, and that's the importance of a leader.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either.
I love empowering them. So they actually end up talking to the individual being interviewed about how we empower them to do what they need to do. And as a new employee or employees in general, it's their responsibility to speak up when they think something needs a change or they need help with something. Yeah, we'll notice if they're kind of lacking on training, but if they need help, we empower them to ask for it.
Yeah.
And trying to set that up for them. And if they want to grow, we had a gentleman who wanted to just be our numbers guy. He just wanted to sit in his own little bat cave, per se.
Yeah, for sure.
And play on the computer and type in numbers. And he started as an employee, just behind the register, ringing people up, taking Amazon. And 3 years later, I think we're at 3 years, he now has his own little bat cave and computer and does everything in terms of payroll and bills and things like that.
Yeah, so you show them the ladder, essentially.
Exactly, and trying to show that with all the team members. There was a young lady that we just hired in August who wanted to do more. She was a manager at her old job, and she's now the manager at my Fenton store with the personality traits and the excitement and her long-term view and desire to grow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the number one thing is people's desire to grow is a
for sure
big seller on hiring them.
Yeah, but I mean, I tell you, like showing them that ladder and giving them now kind of celebratory examples, right? Of like, well, let me tell you about John. He started here, and his first day is just taking Amazon orders, right? And now he's the whatever. You know, John totally made up name. By the way, I was throwing stuff out there. You might have a John, right? You know, Bob and Susie is usually who usually
our
names.
Regional manager. We bought the Monroe store. It was very similar, actually. Worse off than the Ypsi store. The guy was going to lock the door and walk away.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So got a crazy opportunity on that situation. And I knew someone that lived in Monroe. And I was like, hey, I'm buying a store in Monroe. Do you know anybody who would be looking for a job? She's like, how much you paying? I was like, no. And with what she did, I was like, no, we can't afford it. She's like, no, I'm not kidding. How much are you paying? And my husband and I and her had a conversation with her. And next thing you know, she's running the Monroe store.
Very
and
cool.
As a manager and hire staff. And at this point, Lori is my regional manager. She went from running the Monroe store to Monroe and Ypsi and now manages all three. So we have the staff.
Yeah. Then
you have the store managers.
Yep.
And then you have Lori.
Yep.
And then you have Kirk and I.
Love it.
And 99% of the time, Lori and the managers take care of everything. So grateful. Every once in a while, I'll get a phone call. Hey, we had this happen or this came up. Can you come step in? And I think that's I guess you could say, big difference between my husband and I versus maybe some other owners that are in our situation. I'm like, yeah, hey, I'll get there and I'll be there in, how long does it take me to drive?
Yeah.
I'll be there in 45 minutes.
Nice. All right. So let's go from 2 to 3. So this is funny because like my wife and I, we have 2 daughters. And we always say we don't want 3 because we always want it to be one-on-one defense, man-to-man defense. So is 2 to 3. I'm very curious, and I'm sure I'm not the only one that's curious in the business world. When you go from 2 to 3 locations, is it now zone defense / offense, or is it still man-to-man, depending on how you layer your leadership?
All of the above.
You're like, yeah, all of it.
All of it, yeah.
Okay.
We made sure there was staff at every single store, but then it's like, what store? If like there's fires at every store, we're like, which one's a bigger fire? And that's why we had to.
So how have you decided to, like, do you guys have a process of prioritization?
Well, there's my husband, myself, and now our regional manager.
Yeah.
So worst case scenario, all 3 of us are at a different
store. So you
store.
still got man-to-man coverage.
Yes.
You're good to go.
But it works. Even if we grow, I want to make sure, we want to make sure that there is a manager in place that if something comes up, we have it covered. I mean, it's kind of like having kids. You have two girls, you said?
Yeah, I got 2 girls, yeah.
So we went with one store. We bought our first was a year old. And then we went to buy a second store.
Yeah.
And found out pregnant and was super excited. Ended up, a little bit of personal information, ended up with miscarriage, which kind of sucked. But we still got the second store without a second kid. And not too long after that, found out I was pregnant again with twins.
Oh,
so that did not mean a third store for a third kid, but that's basically what ended up happening. What ended up.
Very nice.
Yeah, I had the twins, and 2 days later we signed on the Monroe store. So
cool. That was like a win-win-win there. Oh, wow, that's awesome.
3 boys that could run all 3 stores for us at some point.
Okay. Talk to me about that. That meant something right there. I could just tell it.
Yeah, I realized I want to buy more.
Okay.
We want to grow. So that does not mean we're growing with more kids. But
it's time to have another kid.
But like this vision to empower our current staff to help us grow. So let's say we buy a store that's 20 minutes from someone's house and they've been with us and they're doing an amazing job and watching them grow in their leadership. If we take over that store similar to Ypsi and Monroe and it needs somebody there, they're there already. They're up, they're trained. They know what we want. They know what we look for and need in our business. And we don't have to retrain it again. And they can teach who they hire what's expected.
Yes.
And empower them to do that.
Yeah. The culture just gets stronger and stronger rather than starting from zero again type of a deal. All right. I love it.
And that's a big thing. It's important of culture in a business.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, talk us what are some of the things that you've learned in this journey of being an owner-operator?
Just because I like someone does not mean they are the best employee.
Okay. Examples. Walk us through that, because let's maybe even say that again. Just because you like someone does not mean that they are the right employee for that right job.
Right person for the right job, right.
Or even right person for our team, period. Mm-hmm. Walk us through that. How did you learn that?
Couple different situations. I mean, I am not the one that does the interviews because I'm not the one working with people.
Yeah.
I'm not the one I'm not the one in the store, but I have been in a couple of interviews.
Yeah.
And I really liked this one guy. I really did. He was great. He was super nice. And I was like, yeah, are we going to hire him? They're like, no. Like, why? They're like, well, I don't think he really fits in. I was like, but he was great. Super nice. Yeah. They hired him because I liked him.
Because they want to just follow. Yeah.
Yeah. And not too long after that, we started to learn some of his tendencies of just kind of only doing things when he was told to do stuff and not really trying to grow, not trying to help.
Not a ton of initiative.
Initiative is a great word, yeah.
Yeah, that one is so good because a lot of times I'll tell leaders, I'll say, I use it's called WAIT. So WAIT, and it stands for why am I talking? Because guess what happens when you talk? Your team tends to do what you say, right? And it's like, oh, and that's the perfect example story of you learning that the hard way. To go, okay, maybe I should just be quiet and ask a question instead of make a statement, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, wait, why am I talking? WAIT.
I should really think about that.
It's so good. It's so good, right? Because that's what happens. You insert your influence and like you're the big boss. So they're going to be like, oh, we should probably do that, right? Which, I mean, is total natural human behavior and instinct.
I think that's the other thing I kind of run into and I have trouble with is I don't look at myself as the big boss.
As the big boss? Yeah.
No, I get it. I know that my name is on the piece of paper that says that I own it, but I don't look at it that way.
Yeah.
I kind of work for them. I help them. I'm a support person. I want to be there and do what I can to help them grow. Yeah,
I think it's a double-edged sword because I think it's very important for everyone to know like who's in charge. And I this is where I've ran into this is I was a history teacher, so I love military, right, and wars. So in the military, right, I never served, but I've studied intensely. Everyone always knows who's their upline and downline is perfectly clear. Mm-hmm. We know the flow of communication, like you don't skip the chain of command, all those things, right? Sports, same thing. Like it's crystal clear. You're the captain, you're the head coach, you're the general manager, you're the owner, like it's crystal clear. In business, not always the case. So who do you report to? Well, there's John and there's Bobby, and then sometimes I go to Susie if I have this problem. And you're like, whoa, wait, why? Right. But also like to your point, you're like, yeah, I know my name's on a piece of paper, but that's not how I like to look at it. And it's like, I think that's more in like your approach, right? Because your approach is excellent of like, I work for them. I'm here to support them to win, but also they're still coming to you when a decision needs to be made that's at your level, right? Which is also great, right? So I think it's like, we understand who makes the final decisions, but that doesn't mean that you have to lead like that. Like that, lead down. Like that's not necessarily the case. We want to support and unite.
Micromanage it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, because if you're leading like down like that, that's where micromanagement's going to come in. Like if you're just leaning on the shoulder of your regional manager, guess what she's probably going to do? Lean on the shoulder of all the store managers and be chirping all the time. And then before you know it, you're like, oh my gosh, we're just trying to create an army of ants here to do the thing instead of empowering people. Have you ever had a new team member and they didn't know it was you?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you have to share because that's like super undercover boss style.
It's great. The Ypsilanti store is only 3 miles from my house, and randomly drop off Amazon stuff there, like everybody would.
Yeah.
And
just like a normal consumer.
Just a normal consumer. I'll walk in and I'll stand in line and wait because there'll be a line.
Yeah.
I could cut, but I'm not going to.
Right.
And everybody else there will see me standing there and smile and kind of do the, hey, what's up? And the new person will just have completely oblivious to who I am.
Hi, how can I help you?
Yes, and I'll say, I'm just so frustrated with this. Why can't Amazon say
it? Just pale face immediately.
And then I know that I'm supposed to have either a label or a box. And then I'll depending on what I'm doing at that moment, be like, I have to have a label? Are you kidding? And then I will wait for them to try to explain it to me. I won't do that to someone who's brand new, like their first day.
Especially you see them like get super nervous or something. You're like, well, I'm so sorry.
And then most times someone else standing right behind them will walk up and be like, oh, so you met the owner.
Hi, this is Kristin, our owner.
Hi, I'm Kristin. Yes. For example, like Comcast will drop off. And I'm like, oh, did Comcast tell you about my $5 Starbucks service fee? What? What? And then I just sit there with a giant grin on my face.
Throwing curveballs for good customer service training.
Just to they'll think about it for a second and be confused, and I'll just have a grin on my face just to make the situation be lighthearted about it.
For sure.
Because everybody's frustrated about having to return stuff or be there or stand in line. Why not make it fun?
Absolutely.
For everybody.
So what are some other, give me another learning moment in leadership and owning multiple locations. How many people are on your team total?
I'm going to pull this number randomly out there.
Maybe a range, yeah.
Probably somewhere around 25 to 30.
Total?
25, give or take a few, yeah. Total?
Not each store, total, right?
Total.
Okay, got it. Okay, very cool. Yeah, so the team's getting up there, which is fun. What's the hardest part about being responsible for that many people?
The weight sometimes I feel about what's going on, like with COVID.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
That it was hard. I'm so grateful that everybody in our stores, all 3 stores, stayed healthy.
Yeah.
The entire first year.
So
we did not have a single person, well, one but because they went on vacation but didn't come back.
Yeah.
Nobody got COVID, but there was one weekend. Everybody in Fenton got it.
Oh, no.
And the only person that didn't was the girl who had only been there for 3 days.
Actually, I think I remember you saying this at one point of like, yeah, next week's not going to work. Everyone has COVID. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And you're like, no, seriously. 7 people have it, and they all got it within 24 hours.
We did what we could. Yeah. I realized we ran on around with our heads cut off like a chicken.
Sure you did, yeah.
But we made it work. I was not letting the customers down. We did what we needed to make it work. I think that was a giant learning experience, is making sure we had the coverage that we needed and accepting that we can't do everything.
Yeah.
So we had to close. We had to open late. We had to close early. But everybody understood. I'm very grateful for the patience from everybody.
So good. What this is always my favorite little segment here. What would you say is your greatest, what would you consider, like outside of getting married and your kids and like all that stuff too, right? But let's say that those are 1 and 2. What would you say is your greatest achievement as a small business owner, leader, operator, franchise?
So as a kid, I kind of viewed myself as this like tiny little girl. I mean, I was smaller, even though small I am now. But thought of everybody looking at me that way. I looked at myself that way. I was small, I was quiet, didn't really have a voice to speak up. And with as I've gotten older, I still kind of looked at myself that way. Yeah. Still small, still quiet, kind of trying to stay in the background. People say that I'm not in the background, but I still looked at myself that way. Okay. And with owning our UPS stores, it kind of opened my eyes up to how people really viewed me versus how I viewed myself. Okay. I think it's a big thing is the perception side. Yes. I mean, you can have that person who thinks they're the best. They are great. They know all the best words and do all the best things. And everybody's like, yeah, no. Absolutely no respect for that guy. And then you have others who are quiet, shy, don't really speak up, and everybody thinks they're outgoing. And I'm realizing I kind of fit into that bucket. And I really have worked on trying to accept and believe that I am that person and understand it. So from kind of building up the courage in myself. So
confidence, courage,
yeah, with my lack of inhibition. We were in Las Vegas at a conference, and in this giant room on the first day of this conference, and this guy is juggling on stage, and I'm thinking, juggling, not even my thing. Yeah. And next thing you know, he's like, "I need a volunteer." Oh no. Yeah. You raised your hand. So I sit there for a second, and I kind of give my husband the side eye. He throws his arm across me, and I'm just thinking, I got a second arm here. Yeah, right. And a few moments later, he's like, "Come on, guys, I need a volunteer." And he goes, "Fine." I stand up, and I throw my hand up in the air, and I look around and realize there's 2,000 people in this room. And not realizing what this guy wants. And I end up on stage juggling one-handed with him. He's throwing it from one hand, I'm throwing from the other. Yeah. And I'm doing it. But he told me to keep looking. The whole concept of this talk was to look past what's right in front of you, the idea of the forest from the trees. Yeah. And I feel any business owner needs to make sure that they are seeing the forest from the trees. So true. Yeah, you may randomly bump into a tree, but there's a whole big forest around you to keep going. Yep. And experience. And that's kind of what it was, is to keep looking forward. So every time I looked at the ball, it fell on the ground. Yeah. So he gave me some juggling balls as a token of doing all of that. And the whole rest of the week we were at this conference, I'd have people come up to say, "Hey, how's your juggling going?" I was like, I keep throwing it up, but it's not coming back to me.
That's great. But such a good lesson, though.
I'm just excited that, one, I empowered myself to do that. I took that opportunity. When am I ever going to get to say again that I'm a Las Vegas showgirl?
Yeah. Probably not many more times. Yeah, probably not many more.
But at the same time, how many people in that room didn't? I mean, I love doing like the unexpected. Yeah. But at the same time, planning for the unexpected kind of scares me. Yeah. Sort of like this podcast. I have been for the past couple of days going, what are we going to talk about? What should I say? Oh my gosh.
See, and look, it was just flawless, right?
And here we are just talking. And I think people need to understand that it's the buildup to it that is more nerve-wracking than actually doing it.
I would say the thing that's helped me a lot with that is sports. So I call it the switch, right? So you learn in sports to, when you like step on the field, you flip the switch and you turn it on. And then you step off the field, you turn the switch off. But that switch is hard to build. Like, it takes a minute. Like, you can be super tired, not wanting to do it. And then like you learn the trigger of like, I stepped on the field, the switch is on. Then I step off, turn the switch off. Right. And it removes that buildup of like, not even like nervousness, but like a lot of times it's just excitement. Right? Like, I'm just excited for this thing because maybe I've never done it before, or I don't know how good I am at it, or whatever it is. I always say, like, focus on excitement, not nervous, because it's the same like chemicals. Okay, so just say you're excited, not nervous. But that switch in football, right, and in sports, it removes that. Like, I remember last time I did a big keynote, maybe 1,000 people, right, and people are like, how you doing? Are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, there's nothing to it but to do it. Like, it's not happening for another 20 minutes. I'll turn the switch on in 20 minutes, right? Until then, is it really going to help me to get nervous and more prepared? Like, no, not really. So like, how do you, and I'm like, sports, like that's, you just know when to step on the stage and when to do your thing, you know?
But how do you apply that to a business situation? As a business owner yourself, do you turn on and turn off your business feelings, or do you?
Yeah. So I've learned basically the same thing. It's harder in business, no doubt, because it's like, it's not a start and stop. I mean, any small business owner's like, I'm probably thinking about this thing 25 hours a day, right?
That's why I'm bringing
there's
it
only
up.
24. Yeah, I know. We had an additional when we double think about it. But yeah, you learn how to like, okay, it's 4:00. The kids just came in the door, right? Like my kids need me now. So it's more important for me to be a dad and a husband from 4 to 8 p.m., right? Than it is for me to be a business owner from 4 to 8 p.m., right? Now I put those kids down. I can plug back in from 8:30 to 10:30 p.m., right? And I just turn the switch back on. And that one is actually probably where I'm the best, because I'm like, I'm tired. I don't want to plug back in. And like, but then before you know it, like I literally walk into my office and it's like, it just clicks on. And then before you know it, I look at my watch and I'm like, oh, it's 10:30, 11 o'clock. Time for bed, right? And now I need to recharge. But yeah, it transfers in how you learn. And it's important, right? Because, and I start every single one of my meetings with this. I say, tell me something good outside of work, because we need to remember why we're working. So I'm like, let's bring it back to center here. So like, tell me something good and remember your why. Otherwise, this isn't worth anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but you have a crazy story that I want to make sure that I get to, right? You had something pretty bad happen, and you came on the other side of it and are operating today 30 people, 3 stores, and you're like, I want 2 or 3 more, or whatever the vision is. Walk us through that, because I think somebody could learn something from that.
So let's back up a little bit, actually quite a bit. 2006. Actually, let's go back to 2005. I had just gotten the best job I could have ever gotten.
Okay.
I became a mortgage banker and making decent money. I can't complain about it, 22. And working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Wow. But I was 22 and I was going to make good money that year. That didn't matter. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a house. I didn't have anything. And June of 2006, on my way to work, bright, beautiful, sunny day. And I'm only going to tell you things that I've told because I don't actually have a memory of this. Yeah. But as I came up and over the top of a hill, the traffic was stopped. And I guess I swerved to miss the car that was in front of me. Yeah. And the front passenger side of my car hit the back driver side of a stopped semi at somewhere between 60 and 70 miles an hour.
That's fast.
Yeah. Cars do not fit under stop semis like they do in Fast and Furious.
Yeah. That's yeah, that makes sense. A little cinematography going on there.
So a guy pulled me out of my car, kept me breathing till the ambulance got there. They kept telling the driver of the semi, they didn't think I was going to make it to the hospital. He didn't even know he was in a car accident.
Barely even moved the truck.
Yeah, he heard a crunch, and that's when he opened his door to look. Yeah. And after 2 or 3 days, when they decided I was going to live, they weren't sure if I was going to wake up. I had completely shattered my right orbital bone. I cracked my skull in 7 places with bleeding on one side, bruised on the other. Oh, so you know what an MRI looks like, right? With all the wrinkles in your brain? Yeah. I had no wrinkles. Oh, it was complete gray matter. Yeah. So after 2 or 3 days, when they decided I was going to live, they anticipated me being paralyzed neck down.
Oh, my gosh.
If I woke up.
Yeah.
And I started to have the use of the left side, like they would do testing to see, but my right side wasn't moving. Okay. And I still wasn't waking up. So eventually both sides were moving, but I wasn't waking up. So they came in. They told my mom that they were going to be taking out my breathing tube. If I didn't, they were going to put in a tracheotomy. Yeah. My mom came in that night and started yelling at me. Could you imagine yelling at somebody in a coma?
You know, in those types of situations, some crazy stuff happens.
My mom's like, Kristin, if you don't wake up when they take that out of your mouth tomorrow, you are going to end up with a horrible scar on your neck and regret it the rest of your life. Yeah. And apparently I woke up.
That did it.
And that did it.
A good old mom yelling.
So after 2 weeks of a sleeping coma, they were looking at me being in the hospital 6 months to a year.
Okay.
It took me after about 3 weeks of, the movie 50 First Dates.
Yeah.
That was me every hour on the hour. Every hour on the hour for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'd panic about needing to get back to work that I haven't been in 5 weeks.
And this is only 5 weeks. Okay, so it's 5 weeks after the wreck.
It was 5 weeks of comatose. And finally, when I accepted that I was in a car accident, they sent me home 2 weeks later.
So you were home
After
7 weeks. And they were like, I don't even think she's going to make it, to I don't think she's going to wake up, to I don't think she's going to walk, to home.
And that's when everything started. And that's kind of where my whole team building idea began.
Okay.
And that's what I'm grateful for our businesses.
Yeah.
The teams, like if you don't have a team in place, you're not going to really go too far. You can't know everything. And
so how did you go from there to team being so important?
With speech, OT,
okay,
vocational, from physical therapy to I had 6 or 7 different types of therapists I saw every single day.
So you went from
working,
basically flying solo, right? I mean, you're 22. You're like, I'm gonna make hay while the getting's good, right? Which, like, for sure, we all did that. To having a wreck, an insanely fast recovery to that wreck, to now within that recovery, you learned team because of everybody, your whole support system.
And I realized that life isn't just about me.
Yeah.
It isn't. It isn't about any one of us, that we all need a support system, whether it's your mom, your dad, your team at work, your cat at home that you pet to feel better.
Yeah.
I had
your
one of those
emotional support animal.
Exactly. I've heard of people having emus.
Yeah. He's some type of emotional support animal, essentially. Yes.
But I went from being paralyzed neck down to, in 5 years later, I ran the Detroit Free Press Half Marathon.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool.
So taking that whole big story and everything that I went through, the Brain Injury Association of Michigan reached out to me.
Okay.
I don't know if you heard about how they changed Michigan's auto no fault law in 2015.
I did, yes. I remember this.
They're supposed to be saving money and have all the same benefits, which I'm not going to get completely into the details of that. But it basically broke everything. And because of that, they had been trying to change it for many years before. So in 2013, I was invited to speak in Lansing at the House Insurance Committee.
So cool.
About my story, to tell them if it wasn't for that team of 10, 15 people.
Your support team, essentially,
I wouldn't be there that day talking.
Yeah.
And at that moment is when I realized that I'm not that quiet little girl that I always thought. I am not broken. That was like the thing that came out of my car accident, is I was afraid of everybody looking at me broken, injured.
Yeah.
I could never do anything. I couldn't have a real job. And
you had to relearn a lot, almost everything, essentially. Right. So it's great. No. Story. I love it, because in my head, I'm thinking, man, I thought that what I did was hard. And I'm like, I'm a wussy. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you went from, I'm not sure what's going to happen, period, if I'm going to make it, to which you probably weren't even aware of that at the time.
I was.
Right.
Not so much.
That's why I said most of your account is from what was told to you, to all the way from that to, I just ran a half marathon after relearning how to walk, talk, and work with my hands, like OT, PT, speech, all of the above, right?
And I still work with them.
Yeah.
I get it. I'm sitting here talking to you today as an owner of 3 businesses, as a parent of 3 kids, on multiple boards, including the board of directors for the Brain Injury Association.
Yeah.
But I still see my OT and my a couple other of my team members, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. Yeah. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my family. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the team at the UPS stores.
And I just love how that is why team is so important to you. And that's why you will just be so naturally good at focusing on your team. Last piece, last question, amazing story. I mean, to me, I'm just like, get off the couch and start doing something, people. Because if you can do that, we can do a whole lot less hard things, right? And it's like, that's one of the mottos in my family with my girls. It's like, we do hard things. Like we walk the narrow path, we walk the narrow gate. We're going to do things that are out of the ordinary. Right. And that's a great story. Oh my gosh. Like I'm jacked. It is Friday afternoon and my week is done and I want to go do something great. Last question though. This is what I would like to leave on. What advice would you give 22-year-old before your accident? What advice would you give young Kristin now?
I would say to speak up.
Okay.
Speak up, because there were a lot of things that I just bit my tongue and went along with.
Yeah.
There were a lot of things I was on track to do at that point in my life that, had that car accident not happened, I guess you'd say it would have been a lot of big mistakes.
Yeah.
And though that car accident helped me reevaluate the important things in my life with my family and what I wanted to be when I grow up. I still haven't figured that part out yet.
Yeah. I think
but
the key, and that relates to me so much, and it's one of the reasons that I do what I do, is like, I don't want other people to have to hit the bottom of their barrel before they're like, oh, well, maybe I should learn how to swim. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, learn from you, learn from my story, learn from someone else's story so you don't have to hit the bottom, right? Because of decisions you made or just even bad luck, and have to learn how to swim then, right? Like, learn how to swim now before you have to hit the bottom of your barrel. But I mean, if you're anything like me, like I had to, before I was like, oh, well, now I have to learn how to swim, right? And that was, for me, that was when my dad passed, right? And it was just out of nowhere, right? But ended up being the catalyst I needed to empower me to become who I needed to actually be and what I was born to do.
that's exactly where I'm at with
right.
this.
And that's why I'm like, it's crazy because our stories are so different, but what we learned out of them is very similar. Right. And then also funny how that led into why teams are so important to us, why legacy is so important to us.
And vision. Right? If you don't know where you're going, where you want to go, what's going to push you to go there?
Love it. Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity.
For coming on, for sharing your story, the wins, the failures, the struggles, and obviously the big lessons learned, which I think is the most important piece. Like business, we can do business. Like there's systems and there's things, but unless you know why you're doing it, like you're never going to do it as good as you could.
Desi, thank you for this opportunity.
Well, for sure.
Getting me out of my comfort zone and allowing me the opportunity to tell people about what we do, as well as what I've done and how far I've come. I appreciate you.
Before we jump off, where can people find you, or the stores? Like, give us some information.
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Kristin Kelly Howard.
Okay.
I know there's a link on your page.
Yep.
As well, the UPS stores in Ypsilanti, Fenton, Monroe. You could check out the Brain Injury Association of Michigan. That's something that's really dear to my heart. So
shameless
make sure
plug.
you check
put it in there.
You check it out and see where that's going right now.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the powerful conversation. And that is a wrap today on Designing Leaders with UPS store owner Kristin Howard and your host, Desi. We are out.